And joining us right now on the Rothman Orthopaedics guest line, my good friend. You know him, covered the Sixers for a long time. You're now writing, of course, a columnist for the Bucks County Courier Times, Intelligencer, Gannett, USA Today as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Moore. What's going on there, Tom?
Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Of course, well, first of all, let me just say this. I know it's a holiday, so, happy deadline week. I know we're all really excited, waiting with bated breath to see James Harden, Ben Simmons, what happens, Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, whatever it might be. What's your prep like on a week like this when it comes to the deadline?
Yeah, you just try to kind of be available. And I mean, I remember, trades happening like where I was at the paper in the back when they used to do paste up, where they would physically paste the copy onto the pages, and there was a non-photo blue pen where you could write on it you would write on it so that the composing people would know what to remove, but it wouldn't show up in the paper. I was taking notes when Billy King, I think it might have been the Weber trade. I was taking notes on a 11 by 20, piece of paper that the paper's built on, with what Billy King was saying after. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, the Weber thing. So yeah, it's you never know when it's going to happen. If they do it at 11:30 at night, they may speak at 11:30 at night. Depending. The deadline's Thursday at 3, and you try not to schedule too much where you can't change it, or you don't want any dentist appointments or anything this week. It's not a good time till Friday.
I'm on call all week, basically, is how it works for you.
Yeah, you never know. It could be real quiet, but you just never know.
Right. So on that note, though, just let's walk up to it here, because I know everyone wants to talk about James Harden, and we'll certainly get there. Likelihood that the Sixers will get a deal done this week in general, and then likelihood that the Sixers will move on from Ben Simmons this week. What are the likely scenarios in both cases?
Yeah, I think it's 80% that they would make a move, whether it's a backup point guard or a wing could come off the bench and defend a little, maybe knock down a three or whatever. I would think. Now there is the buyout market in the wake of the trade deadline. And if they were able to get Harden, I would think they would be a more desirable destination, for buyout candidates, that you would just have to pay the prorated minimum for the rest of the year. Harden, I thought last week was maybe 20%. Now I think it's more like 40% chance that they'll do something like that. But I mean, it's funny. You look at the Nets people or the people with the Nets point of view, and like the Nets don't have to do anything. And, Harden, why would they do something now? And, Simmons is down, Simmons is devalued. And then the Sixers people were like, well, Harden doesn't want to play there, which is, there's just, there's two different, reports on that. So you don't know. Although if you saw him the other day, his defense in the first quarter, he was barely in the area code of his guy. He's not exactly a lockdown defender, shall we say.
Yeah.
But it's the scoring and the two-man game with Embiid is what you would be, looking for. You would need to add, you can't just do it straight up. You would need to add another salary to make it work. Thybulle works. Maxey works, Curry works, Korkmaz works, Danny Green works. I mean, there's a lot of different options, and picks don't count in terms of the cap. So
right.
that I would imagine they might have to include something there, but who knows? But these things typically, both sides are kind of like haggling or not giving their best deal, and that tends to happen more Wednesday night, Thursday. Typically, that's why there's usually so many deals at the end, unless they can come to an agreement or a team's trying to cut salary, like the Clippers did with Portland, Portland did, with the Clippers over the weekend.
Right, with the Covington deal and all that stuff. Calling it the Covington deal, of course. But when it comes to the Sixers right now, I look at James Harden, and I see a guy that is obviously having his worst year of his career so far. Defense has never been really a bragging point for James Harden. But when I look at the scoring, I'm trying to not get too put off by just the numbers right now and try to compound that with how it would be if he had Joel Embiid. How much of an uptick do you think we would see from the production of James Harden, who's shooting career worst in 3-point percentage and points per game?
Yeah, I mean, you would think they can't really double team both of them, because if you do, that means you have one guy guarding the other three players on the court. So somebody's going to get better opportunities. You could see teams play a lot of zone against the Sixers, which the Mavericks did on Friday. The Sixers were +9 in the first half against man-to-man, -18 in the second half against zone. The Sixers do seem to struggle against the zone at times in terms of either movement or getting the ball to the high post. They got to knock down shots if they're not having a good 3-point shooting game, and that's also a way to kind of, you can give more attention to Embiid. And not necessarily just with a center, but just get bodies on him and keep him, off the glass, largely or whatever. So, yeah, it's it really, he's 32. I mean, you're looking at, the guy could theoretically make $60 million when he's 37 years old. If he picks up, with a max deal, if he picks up his option and gets a max deal the last year, and the production has dropped somewhat. But the other side of the coin is, Embiid will be 28 next month. And I talked to Doc Rivers last week, about it. And he said, I tell our guys, realize that this is a gift you have, and we want to take advantage of this gift. Doesn't mean they have to do things, but, they have to make a trade or whatever. But the point is that, it's probably not going to last forever. Big guys, the history of big guys don't usually play at a high level until they're 36 or 37 years old, like LeBron is. I would be shocked if in 9 years, Joel Embiid is averaging 25 and 10. I sure. Just don't. The wear and tear on the joints, the knees, the ankles, just everything. So if you make the trade for Harden either now or in the summer, it's win now, and there's no question. You probably have about a 3-year window where you got to get it done. Young players, unless they're going to be contributing or get you other assets, it's going to be like a Lakers situation, probably more so. Tyrese Maxey is still here, obviously, because he can play. Mm-hmm. But draft picks, things like that, you see them, go out so you can get you trade them typically so you can get a, quality wing off the bench, or a guy can knock down threes with the second unit or a stretch four or whatever it is. So it definitely is going to move the needle, and it will be the time to win will be now, whether it's Thursday and the rest of the season or in the summer, if they work it out.
Understood. So you see Tyrese Maxey as being a guy that would stick around the Sixers, very much value him, and would it incorporate him in a Harden deal?
I don't think, again, I don't think that Daryl Morey would want to do that. I wouldn't expect him to do that. But and he's been a revelation. He's been incredible. But I mean, Hall of Famers have been traded. Like,
right.
People say, and the one thing I'll say about like Matisse Thybulle is if you watch the game Sunday, DeRozan had 45. They couldn't guard him. They had no wing defenders. They tried Danny Green on him. They tried Korkmaz, has no chance. And he went 18 for 30. By the way, Sunday was the first game in the NBA this year where there were 2 40-point scorers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
40 and DeRozan 45. I did not realize that. I saw that online. Mm-hmm. I thought that was very interesting, because I would have thought with so many guys putting up big numbers that would have happened already.
Is that your dog feeding you stats as you're doing the show?
Yeah, he's annoyed because probably somebody drove through our cul-de-sac or something. He thinks he owns half of Warrington.
Understood. So let me ask you about another deal real quick, because I also want to ask you about Doc Rivers, but one of the other hot deals of the week was Bradley Beal, and talking about Matisse Thybulle and Tyrese Maxey. I would assume if you would think the Sixers would kind of back away from a Maxey for Harden deal incorporated with Ben Simmons, that they wouldn't really be offering up Tyrese Maxey for Bradley Beal as well.
Well, probably not. I mean, although Beal's younger, he's an off-the-ball guy, so you could see a backcourt of Maxey and Beal work because they can play together. I mean, a backcourt of Harden and Maxey could work too, but Harden's going to have the ball in his hands most of the time. And, Maxey's shooting over 40% on threes, so he can be, you can see his confidence growing, catch and shoot in the corner, the wing, things like that. You could see him playing alongside Harden. He just wouldn't be leading the fast break all the time, and they would probably be more of a half-court team, which suits Embiid and it suits Harden. They'll run when they can, but it would be probably more limited. Beal's younger. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I would think it's less likely they could get Beal than Harden. I don't know that for a fact, but I would just think the chances that the Wizards, wouldn't re-sign him, or the chances are high they really want to re-sign him. Where if Harden tells the Nets, I don't want to be here, whether it's now or in the summer or whatever, they would have to do a sign and trade or whatever. And to get something back, whether that would be Simmons, probably Simmons, and then whatever, to make it work. But and Dame Lillard would be a guy that would really intrigue me, but I don't know. It sounds like Portland just trying to cut salary, essentially washing away this year. He's been hurt a lot, but want to keep him. You would think that they would probably, trade his backcourt partner before they would trade him. McCollum,
right.
You would think, but you just never know sometimes with how things go. What they got under the luxury tax now with the Covington, with that Covington deal. So there's just so many moving parts and so many things. The whole idea of trying to add Tobias Harris just makes it so much tougher, and you probably have to involve a third or fourth team to try to make it. Just makes it so difficult. To do. I would think if they're going to do it, it would be Simmons, and they would get a star back. I think Morey doesn't want to make a deal that's a good deal now and find out in the summer he might have been able to get a star, because he's all about getting stars, put as much talent together and figure it out then. And I think to get very good players, John Collins, Bogdanovich, whatever from Atlanta, or would help. But you want something that's going to put you over the top. And he acquired Harden, in Houston from OKC when OKC wasn't going to be able to max out Westbrook, Harden, and Kate and Durant. So they traded Harden, and Harden, just flourished and ended up having an MVP season, averaged I think 32 a game over 4 years for the Rockets. Now they never went to the finals. But had some regular season success and won some playoff series.
Certainly. I want to ask you about this article that you posted last week, and we'll get to some of your more recent stuff. But this article picked up a lot of steam, and it was about the relationship of Doc Rivers and Ben Simmons. And this is, of course, people can check out Bucks County Courier Times. And you also tweeted out the link as well. I believe I also retweeted it. But this article did a great job of talking about and getting these different type of quotes about Doc Rivers and his relationship with Simmons. It seems like, and Doc even said this during one of his press conferences, that he has been more supportive of Ben Simmons than anybody. But when I go back to it, I said, yes, he was during the regular season, and was in his initial press conference when he was originally asked about benching Ben Simmons, acting like that was ridiculous. And then a game or two later, he actually benched Ben Simmons at the end of the game. And then he threw him out of practice, and I know he was acting as a malcontent, but it seems like that relationship certainly was strained, all jumping off from the point that he was benched, and that he also said he didn't know if he could win a championship with him as his point guard. Does Doc really think that he could still be that supportive again of Ben Simmons, despite all the stuff I just listed off?
Well, I mean, there have been sort of rumblings from the Sixers, whoever, about, still saying Ben, Simmons could theoretically, come back and play here, which I just don't think there's any way he would do that regardless. Maybe they would. I mean, if that would help him rebuild his value, and he's always been a very good regular season player, I would understand it. I just don't think, that would happen. But yeah, I mean, it was like a continuation of Brett Brown last year, really, pretty much until Game 7, when David Murphy said, do you see Ben Simmons? What do you think you can be a championship contender with Ben Simmons as your point guard? And his response was, I don't know about that, which is an honest answer. And coming off of, they played the whole season to have the best record in the Eastern Conference, had the best home record in the Eastern Conference, and they lost 3 or 4 home games to a younger, less experienced team. So I think he was stunned. I think he thought they would win Game 7, and they were in position after blowing 25-point lead in Game 5. I mean, they could have easily won 6 of the 7 games, in that series, and they were the better team. So, I mean, I think he likes, Simmons. I don't, but I mean, there's not much you can do. And, Ramona Shelburne's story was that, Simmons apparently was upset that Rivers didn't come out to see him after not returning his text messages and phone calls. So, like, how do you know, and your players wanted to go out there and he said, don't come out there. So how do you know you were supposed to go out there? And that may be revisionist history. That might be what he wanted. That also might be, it sounds good now. I'll try to, deflect blame here, deflect blame there, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. It's like being in a relationship and somebody says, just leave me alone. And then you leave them alone. Yeah. They're like, well, why aren't you coming over? That kind of thing. Anyway. Yeah.
I don't want anything for my birthday. Why didn't you get me something for my birthday?
No gifts this Christmas, right? Yeah. Don't fall for that. It's a trap. Sure. Now you more recently also talked about some other stuff from Doc Rivers. And it had to do with championship contending. People can also check this out with Gannett Media as well. But when it comes to Doc Rivers and a championship caliber team, what does he think is missing from this Sixers squad right now?
Well, obviously he knows. I mean, he said it a couple of weeks ago that rebounding, they were last in the league in rebounding. They might not be last anymore, but they were as of last week, which is and the only change is going from a 6'2" starting point guard to a 6'10" starting point guard. I'm sorry, to a 6'2" starting point guard, and that's not Tyrese Maxey.
Sure,
but if you look at the numbers, Harris's numbers are similar, Embiid's numbers are similar, but you lose about 4.5 rebounds from Simmons to Maxey, and that's the difference. And that's how they were 9th in rebounding last year, and then they were last this year, and that's all it takes. It's a huge, it's a huge difference. But he said the one thing he sees from this group that he saw with his 07-08 Celtics was sort of the subjugating the ego, that they're it's for the group, it's the team. And he said part of that here is we don't have 3 stars. He likes to talk about the 3 superstar system. Mm-hmm. Well, they have 1 superstar, and you could argue that probably that's all they have. They have perhaps 1 emerging star in Maxey and some very good players in Tobias Harris and Seth Curry, but I don't think they're ever going to be kind of confused with being stars. So yeah, that's what you need. And he said last year, interestingly, I thought last year they didn't all buy in. There was still some individual stuff. There was still some I want mine stuff, in it last year. Whether he said part of that might have been that it was my first year here. They were learning me. I was learning them. This is the second year for the bulk of these guys, and they know what I want. They know what I expect, and things like that. And he said, it's always now's the time. It's always now's the time. But, he wants Morey to make a good trade. And he said they talk every day. Morey knows what he wants and what the Sixers need, but he doesn't want to make a bad deal that's going to, hamstring him, or trade a first round pick for a guy and then turn out you needed a first round pick, to acquire Harden in the summer, let's say, or Beal, or even, potentially Lillard. So yeah, it was just interesting. And the Clippers, he had a Clippers team with
Chris Paul, obviously Griffin, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, all those guys.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Excuse me. And he thought they had a chance to win, and they were up 3-1 in the second round, lost 4-3. And he said, kind of looking back, he said it was all, I got to be the star. I got to be the star. He said there was jealousy. He said, looking back, you realize, we were kind of, it wasn't real. We thought we had the talent, but sometimes you can have the talent and not have the right attitude, and vice versa. So he likes where the Sixers are, attitude wise, but he knows they need more. They just need more to be an elite. Their bench just isn't good enough. And I think they're proving that. Furkan Korkmaz has had a very difficult year. And you just don't, to have him consistently getting 15 minutes in the playoffs. I think you saw last year, he had 1 good game out of the 12, and you need more than that from your bench. I mean, every time they went to the bench, they couldn't wait to get Embiid and the starters back in because they just weren't able to hold the fort. And that's what you need the bench to do, at least be able to hold the fort.
Gotcha. 2 quick things for you. I know your latest article just dropped at 5 a.m. Monday morning. So you were talking about the worst trade deadline deals. You had done the best. You're just doing the worst. That just dropped. When I think of bad deadline deals, and I haven't read your story yet. By the time we tape this, it's not out. But one of the worst I can go back to is in terms of like great expectations and not coming close to it. It's the Chris Webber deal. Like that to me is one of the all-time most exciting. And then, but I don't think he's really that guy anymore. Oh, he's definitely not that guy anymore. But when you just think about that deal isolated, what do you remember about Chris Webber coming to Philadelphia?
For sure. Yeah, it was trade. I think it was February. It was 23rd. It was 2004. It was Jim O'Brien's 1 year here.
Okay.
And they made the trade. We were in New York, and they were playing the Knicks that night. And Iverson talked to us pregame, which was unusual, outside the locker room.
Oh boy!
And the first thing he said was, "I talked to Chris, and he understands this is my team." So he was already like, Chris Webber may have been the guy in Sacramento, but you're not the guy in Philly. And they made the playoffs, lost in the first round 4-1 to the Pistons. And the next year, with a whole year here, did not make the playoffs. And that was the fan appreciation fiasco where they showed up late and the whole mess with Mo Cheeks and Billy King was all mad. And then they ended up buying him out the next year, and he signed with the Pistons. But he had microfracture surgery and just was not the player that he had been, earlier in his career. He just couldn't move, and it just didn't work. I mean, Billy King took a shot. It just didn't work. And they didn't trade a lot for him. I think it was like Corliss Williamson, Brian Skinner, and Kenny Thomas. But they took on a lot more salary. They did not win. And then they had to pay the guy like $40 million to go away, for 2 years. So, yeah, it was a swing and a miss. He took a swing. I give him credit. But yeah, that was not a good one. Jeff Malone for Jeff Hornacek, and Jeff Malone and a first rounder for Jeff Hornacek was another bad one. Because they used the first rounder on BJ Tyler, who was a guard out of Texas, who played 1 year. The Sixers let him go in the expansion draft, and he didn't play again. He had a nerve issue. One of the beat writers used to say he called him B because he had no J.
It's funny. Iverson had that conversation with Chris Webber before the game. He meant to have it at practice, but we all know AI, man.
Yeah, that wouldn't happen. Yeah.
And then finally, I know you gave us a percentage here earlier. You were talking about an 80% chance that the Sixers get a general deal done. No specifics involved, not Ben Simmons, nothing. Just you're about 80% sure they do something.
Yeah, I would think so. Like, unless there's just absolutely nothing to do and they don't want to, trade, like I said, whether it's Korkmaz or Shake Milton or, something to get a Paul Reed, possibly Charles Bassey, whatever, to get something back that would help them a little bit. Now they could try the buyout market, but I think they probably need a couple things. So if they're not sure, if they can't do the Simmons deal, maybe they could make a deal for one of them and then get somebody else in the buyout market, in late February or early March or whatever.
All right. Any last thing for you then? Oh, it was 60% that they moved Ben?
No, I said 40%.
40%.
I guess
okay.
It was 20% before, and now 40. I would say 40% now.
Gotcha.
But it's still going to, it's the Nets basically have to decide that and Simmons. It sounds like he's going to take a couple weeks to be ready to play once he's traded. And Irving only plays on road games. You know what I mean? Durant's, had some injury issues. So I mean, even if Harden's not busting it at the defensive end, they probably have a better chance right now if he's going to play. If he wants out and is going to go through the motions, that's a different story. So yeah, I would say 40%, chance that they trade Simmons. Again, total guess.
Gotcha. Appreciate it. Tom Moore, always a pleasure catching up with you, my friend. Greatly appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out all Tom has to offer. You can always follow him, of course, on Twitter right here, and follow all his great columns for the Bucks County Courier Times, Intelligencer, and of course, Gannett USA Today, part of that network as well. Tom Moore, great catching up with you, brother. Thanks so much.
Always enjoy it, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tom Moore joining us on the Rothman Orthopaedics guest line.